Thanks for watching Night TV International and Wednesday Debate Live with Taghreed Hussein. Well, tonight we'll be discussing more about our deep-rooted relations with India. Egyptian-Indian relations are very special. India is one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a variety of a rich culture and heritage. It has achieved all-round socio-economic progress since independence. As the seventh largest country in the world, India stands apart from the rest of Asia, marked as it is by the mountains and the sea, and definitely this gives the country a distinct geographical entity. Spanning across the various timelines of history, bilateral relations between Egypt and India have gone through major developments in the different eras. Understanding and accordance over several issues of common interest is definitely distinguishing the bilateral relations between both countries. Keeping in view the development of relations between both nations, the potential also for the future growth, both countries, Egypt and India, are working together to upgrade their relations to the level of strategic partnership covering political, security, defense, energy, and economic areas. By doing so, the two sides are seeking to maximize the common interests in exchanging support to overcome the difficulties and also the challenges that the world is facing today. We're really honored to have with us tonight, live at Nile TV studios and on Wednesday Debate with Taghreed Hussein, His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, His Excellency, my guest of honor tonight, and we will be talking about our distinctive relations and the distinctive partnership between Egypt and India, how both countries actually managed to reinforce their ties over the past years through opening more channels of cooperation. So reading more about distinctive Egyptian-Indian relations, but first let's check today's top stories, where His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had inaugurated earlier Wednesday the nitrogenous fertilizer complex in Ain al-Sukhna in northeastern Egypt to cover local needs and export surplus to dozens of countries. The complex includes 6 mega factories to produce the fertilizers. In the inaugural ceremony, the President said that it took the state 4 years to inaugurate this important complex. President Sisi affirmed that the availability of sufficient natural gas in the past few years has enabled the state to establish phosphate fertilizer plants instead of exporting raw phosphate. The President added that the agricultural land is now available for all of the aspiring farmers and investors, noting that the land is equipped with modern irrigation systems and supplied with water. The head of state had praised uniquely the engineered water pumping stations and reiterated that the amount of water used to irrigate the mega project is huge, noting it comes from the Red Sea, filtered agricultural drainage, and underground water. President Sisi had asked the universities and schools to organize field trips to mega projects so students can realize the achievements and get inspired. The President also said that media coverage of those projects will reassure people that Egypt is moving forward and is developing in steady steps. Welcome back, and our guest of honor tonight, after checking the presidential news, is His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt, and we're really honored to have this exclusive interview after His Excellency President Sisi's historic visit to India that really witnessed a great breakthrough, Ambassador, great achievement that is based on solid foundation. Well, tell us more, Ambassador, about the latest visit. We've seen a very warm welcome for the President to India, His Excellency as the chief guest at the 74th Republic Day of India. Very meaningful and significant visit.
Yeah. Well, let me just go back very briefly to give you the background. You know, India and Egypt are two of the greatest ancient civilizations in the world. Our contacts go back thousands of years ago. They were nurtured with a close friendship between Saad Zaghloul and Mahatma Gandhi, also between our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and President Gamal Abdel Nasser, our close cooperation in the non-aligned movement. But coming to the present era, President Sisi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power at the same time in 2014. And President Sisi, in fact, visited India twice in 2015 for the third India-Africa Forum Summit and in 2016 on a state visit. Now, we have since then had regular exchange of ministerial visits. Unfortunately, the pandemic came as a bit of a break in between when it was difficult to have physical visits, naturally, because of the restrictions. But it keeping in mind the improvement of the relations and the importance that India attaches, we decided to invite President Sisi as the chief guest for Republic Day. Now, this is the most important honor that we can bestow on the leader of a foreign country, because the Republic Day is watched by everybody in India, all people, more than 1 billion people would have watched the Republic Day parade. They have all noted carefully that the President of Egypt is there as the chief guest. And in fact, the President was received with great warmth, great hospitality.
Let us remember together those moments of honor, Ambassador, here, as we see those excerpts, important excerpts from this important visit by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that has witnessed a real breakthrough, a new breakthrough actually, on the solid foundation between both countries' relations. And as His Excellency has mentioned, that the President al-Sisi being chosen as the chief guest at the 74th Republic Day Parade in India is the highest honor that can be bestowed on a leader of a foreign country.
Yes. So you see, this is the first time that the President of Egypt has been invited as the chief guest. We've of course had visits earlier also by President Nasser on a number of occasions. The others were also invited, but this is the first time. And what it means is that one whole day is devoted to the Republic Day celebrations. So let me explain briefly. The President President Sisi was received by our President on the morning of the parade. Then they get into a car, they drive down the main boulevard.
We see here the cordial and the warm welcome.
Yes, this was the day before.
Yeah.
So it is a formal visit for one day where he is received in the President's, we call it Rashtrapati Bhavan, by the President and our Prime Minister. I was also there.
Yes.
And then he inspects the Guard of Honor. Then we have delegation level talks with the Prime Minister. We have signing of the MOUs. Then there's a press conference. And then in the evening, there is a banquet hosted by the President. And in fact, it is done only for very few leaders. It was done after a long time. And then the next day is only for the parade. So as I was saying, the President and our President, both Presidents went down the main boulevard. They were received by our Prime Minister and all the ministers. They watched the parade. One of the very interesting things was that a military contingent from the Egyptian army took part in the parade. And this was the first contingent. It led the Republic Day parade. So everybody in India has also noticed that the Egyptian armed forces.
We've seen this, and it has been moments of honor and pride, actually, and moments that is going to be remembered.
Yes.
In the long standing foundation of relations between both nations. Ambassador, we share close relations based on a very long history of cooperation, both regionally and internationally, also close ties on the global issues with a shared desire to take definitely those relations forward. So the sky is the limit. Let us watch the upcoming report, Ambassador, that highlights Egyptian-Indian relations. And we will be back with our guest of honor tonight on Nile TV International, His Excellency Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt, to discuss further more about our distinctive relations.
Egypt and India share close relations based on long history of cooperation on regional and global issues, with a shared desire to take these relations to a higher level. The two countries have a long history of joint work, whether in the non-aligned movement or bilateral coordination, aiming to achieve development goals. Reflecting the depth of the Egyptian-Indian relations, India has invited Egypt as a special guest for the G20 summit, with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the chief guest, at India's 74th Republic Day parade, the very thing that shows the age-old relations between the two countries. Economically, relations and trade exchange between Egypt and India have been lasting over thousands of years, despite global changes. Bilateral trade is significantly boosting, with investments increasing in a number of fields, with several Indian companies operating in Egypt. Egyptian investors, too, are interested to expand their business in India. Egypt and India can capitalize on many opportunities to boost cooperation in the fields of agriculture, economy, trade, industry, education, health, culture, tourism, as well as science and technology. There is always a great potential for increasing cooperation between Egypt and India across a number of vital domains, as Egypt and India share a common understanding on many issues and seek to closely coordinate efforts at regional and international forums to address them.
It was a great honor, Ambassador, His Excellency President Sisi, as the chief guest, as we said, at the 74th Republic Day Parade in India. Well, until we have witnessed this peak in our distinctive relations, definitely a lot of hard work has been there beforehand to prepare. Shuttle visits, diplomacy, also meetings and exchange of visits between top-notch personalities in both nations, Egypt and India.
Yes. You see, as I was saying, that the pandemic created a bit of a lull because it prevented physical visits. But we have been working to strengthen both our defense, political and trade relations. So you see, the bilateral trade increased by 75% in 2021-22, and it reached a record high of US $7.26 billion. And the trade grew on both sides. Egypt's exports to India grew by 86%. India's exports to Egypt grew by 65%. One of the interesting things was that Egypt was one of the first countries to start organizing trade fairs in a physical format. So from June 2021 onwards, we had a large number of Indian business delegations and export promotion councils coming here. So that helped, contribute to the growing trade.
Yes.
Then we also had a number of defense delegations, and I encouraged many of them to visit Egypt. For the first time, we had joint exercises between the air forces of both countries. We've had 9 naval ship visits and joint exercises. Now, in September 2022, our defense minister visited Egypt. And keeping in mind the growing defense cooperation, he's also signed an MOU on defense cooperation. This was quickly followed by the visit of our external affairs minister in October, when the invitation to President Sisi to visit India as the chief guest for the Republic Day Parade was extended. And in November, we had our environment minister coming for the COP27. So we had 3 of our very important ministers visiting Egypt in this period, September to November.
Yes.
And then in January, we had a visit of your Minister of IT and Telecommunications, followed by the visit of President Sisi.
Yes.
So you can see that a lot of high-level activity has been packed in, and even as I speak, your finance minister has been to India in February, and your foreign minister has just returned from the visit to India in early March. So we've had 6 ministerial visits and a presidential visit within 6 months.
Yes, excellent. And we're really happy with the peak in our relations and how distinctive Egypt and India relations are. We've seen also latest development in our foreign policy, foreign relations, where both nations are seeing eye to eye vis-a-vis the regional as well as international relations as well.
That's right. You see, Egypt and India as two major powers have generally followed an independent foreign policy. And we were, of course, the founders of the non-aligned movement in 1961 along with Yugoslavia. And we were an inspiration to many countries which were gaining independence in Africa and Asia to somehow to remain independent and not necessarily become part of one camp. Now today, when there is growing conflict and growing polarization in the world, there's a conflict between the West and the East in Ukraine. Yeah. There's differences between the North and the South. Also because of the Ukraine conflict, there is a big rise in cost of energy, food inflation. So these are areas where India and Egypt can work together. And the G20 provides us a forum to articulate the viewpoints of developing countries. Yes. And we are very glad that Egypt is present because as a major power in Africa, it can help express the main issues of concern to countries in Africa and the Arab world.
Yes, very important actually. Egyptian-Indian bilateral relations are definitely flourishing. Also Egyptian-Indian bilateral trade, as His Excellency has outlined. Egypt is one of India's most important trading partners in the African continent. And we're working in that respect, of course, definitely for opening a new chapter in our trade relations, boosting them forward, Ambassador.
That's right. So as I mentioned that more than 600 Indian companies have come to Egypt in the last year and a half to take part in trade fairs. The Indian investments are growing. We have about $3.2 billion of investments in Egypt. They are mainly in the manufacturing sector and they contribute to Egypt's economy because they employ about 38,000 Egyptians directly and about 5% of Egypt's exports globally are from the Indian companies. Yes. So now because of President Sisi's visit and the enormous publicity that the visit received in India, number of leading Indian companies are showing interest in investing in India. We have some investments which are being discussed. And the Indian companies which are present are already planning to invest another $800 million over the next few years. Another very encouraging and very interesting development is that 3 of our leading renewable energy companies have signed MOUs to develop green hydrogen and green ammonia in the last 6 months with a total value of US dollars 18 billion. So I'm
that's great news.
Yes, I'm confident that once these projects are implemented, they would transform the economic relationship between India and Egypt.
Definitely, and because also, so to speak, the investment climate in Egypt is definitely also encouraging lots of Indian businessmen to come and invest to the country. The strategic location of Egypt as the center of production and re-exportation of products also to the European and the African nations, and we have a close bond with India also in that respect.
That's right. So Egypt enjoys a strategic location because it straddles Africa and the Gulf countries. It is also very close to Europe. Yes. Which is a very important market. Moreover, Egypt is part of a number of free trade agreements. It is part of 8 free trade agreements with Africa, with the Gulf countries, with the EU, with the East European countries, yes, also with Latin America. So any company setting up manufacturing activity in Egypt has the advantage of utilizing these FTAs to access other markets. And I hope that more Indian companies use this advantage that Egypt offers, because in addition, Egypt has a lot of land. There's no scarcity of land because a lot of it is desert. So you can easily build, factories. You also have good infrastructure. You have enough electricity. You have roads. You have efficient ports. You have labor, which is very reasonably priced. So Egypt certainly offers many advantages.
Yes. Well, Ambassador, we're talking about enhancing cooperation on all levels, and definitely is India, for India by far, very distinctive concerning financial technology. And those are domains that are very much interesting. And Egypt is very much interested in enhancing cooperation with India in that respect, in the field of financial inclusion and financial technology domains.
Right. So you see, what has happened in India is that the services sector has grown very rapidly.
Yeah.
And particularly the financial sector. We are globally competitive in many ways. India is more advanced than even some of the Western countries or the US. In the last few years, there has been a revolution in terms of financial inclusion, because we've opened 400 million new bank accounts for the poorest people in India. And we have ensured that they can make payments through the mobile phone and that they have bank accounts. We are also seeing a complete transformation in digital payments. So there are a number of apps which are either developed in India or there are overseas applications. So today, if you go to India, you will see that the person who is on the street, because India is similar to Egypt,
Yeah.
person who is even selling apples and bananas and guavas on the street, he has 3 or 4 signs: pay by Google Pay, or some other app, Phone Pay, or we have our own indigenous app, UPI. So even the poorest of Indians and ordinary Indians, when they are buying things, they are using digital means. And it has enabled India during the COVID pandemic, for instance, when we gave some cash subsidy to our poor people, we just transferred it directly into our account.
We can follow here those moments with pride in our bilateral relations and cooperation with India on more than one level. Let me say that the peak and the climax was His Excellency the President being the chief guest at Republic Day. This is going to be actually remembered for a long time. The close understanding that is witnessed between both countries, between Egypt and India, on many levels of mutual concern, concerning regional developments, international levels as well. Also the current unprecedented global crisis, we have been seeing eye to eye, Ambassador, on more than one important file.
Yes. So you see, India is holding the presidency of the G20 from the 1st of December 2022 to the end of November 2023.
Yeah.
And under the G20, we are holding about 200 meetings at various levels. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has come up with a theme for the G20 saying one world, one family, one future. So what we want to highlight is that there should not be differences between countries. This is one world and this is one family, and it faces the same future. And we need to cooperate with each other in tackling major crises arising from climate change, food security and energy security, which have been endangered by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the fertilizer crisis. And we are seeing that the Ukraine conflict, for example, has had a very major adverse impact on many of the developing countries, including Egypt. So we are also seeking ways of debt reduction. So we are trying to ensure that during our G20 presidency, developing countries also get an opportunity to express and articulate the challenges and issues they face.
Yes, lots and lots, of course, in our sense of cooperation for our unprecedented goals together. More than 6 decades ago, the two countries founded the NAM, and they now have an opportunity to be able to forge a new path actually ahead of their strategic and economic interests. So another milestone here, Ambassador.
That's right. As we discussed, the world is increasingly polarized. It has not recovered fully from the once-in-a-century COVID-19 pandemic, and then the Ukraine crisis is something which is affecting countries across the world. There have been conflicts before and wars before, but they did not affect the entire world. They affected some countries around the region. Now, the non-aligned movement at that time, it offered an alternative, because there was a Cold War, the superpowers were pressurizing all the countries to join one bloc or the other. But the non-aligned movement proved an inspiration. But today, I think many of the developing countries have also developed certain capacities. There are a lot of ways in which they can help each other. And I think this is something that we must focus on. There are many solutions which, say, India has developed. I just mentioned about the rapid progress that we have made in financial
and we're happy to learn more concerning that. Even the vendors on the street, they have even those apps usage.
Yes, and
great.
Of course everybody else
and everybody
has,
else,
yes.
Of course.
So we are happy to share our successful examples, and there are many areas, whether it is renewable energy or manufacturing, or India is one of the largest producer of food grains, and the largest producer of milk, fruits, vegetables, meat. Many of these items we are supplying to Egypt, but we can consider supplying more. So the focus, I think, should be for the developing countries to strengthen their South-South cooperation, and also for transfer of technology and best practices between each other.
That's great. Actually, we moved great steps in that respect. Also, since we are talking about one of the oldest civilizations in the world, so the cultural links between both countries are definitely very special. And who would ever forget, the India by the Nile, and lots of beautiful events that Egypt boasted here. The cultural links between Egypt and India are very special.
That's right. Our cultural links go back many thousands of years ago. In fact, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi mentioned that 4,000 years ago there was trade between India and Egypt, and he's from Gujarat, in a port called Lothal. But what I found very interesting during my stay here is that there are a lot of similarities between the pharaonic culture, the structure of the temples, the gods and goddesses, the way they are worshipped, and what we still practice in Hinduism today. Secondly, in the last few decades, I think the Egyptians have become addicted to Bollywood. They've all grown up watching films like Mother India, Sangam, and even the younger generation today watches Z, they watch Netflix. There are
Shah Rukh Khan.
Yes, and Amitabh Bachchan and Shah Rukh Khan are household name. And very importantly, I think the Egyptian people feel that the Indian values, where we attach a lot of importance to family, we respect our elders, we respect women.
We have a lot of our family values, lots in common.
So they feel that these values, they feel very close to these values.
Yes, a very distinctive, actually, cultural link between both countries, tying Egypt and India. Let's watch. We'll be back. Definitely our cooperation extends on more than one level. We're talking our interest, we as Egyptians, in Bollywood and what Bollywood presents. Also, there is a sense of cooperation in the different Indian dance troupes that come and would visit Egypt and present the culture and the folklore. We've seen many of those beautiful performances at the Cairo Opera House and more. Ambassador, this is a very nice area for our sense of bond and friendship and cooperation.
Yes, I find that people at all levels of Egyptian society are enthralled by Indian culture, and it is, of course, Bollywood is an important part, but they also are quite fascinated by Indian music, Indian dance. Now, in the last few years, I find that yoga has become very popular in Egypt, and many people, Egyptians, are going to India to learn yoga, and then they are carrying out classes. There is also, I am told, a lot of interest in meditation. Yeah. So we, of course, have a cultural center called MAKIC. It was opened in 1992, and we regularly conduct classes in yoga, in one of the dance forms, Kathak, and we also teach Urdu and Hindi. So in addition, the number of Indians visiting Egypt for tourism is again increasing. Last year we had more than 100,000 Indians who came to Egypt, and I'm sure there will be many more people from India who would like to go to Egypt. I would encourage more Egyptians to go to India and discover India, because there are not too many Egyptians who have been going to India.
Well, it's an invitation here on behalf of Nile TV International to discover beautiful India, the beauty of India, and lots of attractions actually in India. Your Excellency, if we talk about Indian attractions for our audiences around the world today, and a sense of like an invitation for our viewers all around the world to visit India, what would you tell them?
Well, India, is such a large country. It is a subcontinent. So we have virtually everything to offer. So anybody planning a visit to India, you need to spare at least 7 to 10 days. And that too, you can only focus on 1 or 2 parts. So very briefly, we have the Himalayas in the north, where you can do trekking and mountaineering. Then throughout the country, we have a lot of wildlife parks. And there you can actually see tigers, lions. In the east you can see rhinoceros, you can see elephants. Then of course we have many beaches. We have a coastline of 7,000 kilometers. And in many parts of the country we have beautiful monuments. In Rajasthan, for example, there are many, many large forts. There are many palaces across the country.
Yes.
In the south there are many temples. There are also many Islamic monuments which have been well preserved. You have the Taj Mahal, you have Fatehpur Sikri. In
And
Delhi alone,
Ramadan is going to be very vivid since we are approaching Ramadan.
And Delhi alone, there are many monuments. The Humayun's tomb. You have Qutub Minar, which is similar to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but it's more than 1,000 years old. Hyderabad has many monuments. So there is a lot for everybody in India. We have these luxurious trains, Palace on the Wheels. There are 3-4 trains where you can spend a week on the train, having the most fantastic food, and then doing sightseeing. It's a bit like your river cruises, but you do it by train.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely tourism cooperation between both countries is flourishing. We're talking tonight Egyptian-Indian relations, major developments, very distinctive ties between both countries, and tonight it's the taste of the Indian flavor. Let's watch. We'll be back.
Indian culture is full of unique customs and traditions. These cultural aspects differ widely across India's 28 states and 7 territories, and many of them stem from ancient Indian scriptures and texts. One of the most popular customs and traditions in Indian culture is the Namaste greeting, sometimes called Namaskar. It translates as "I bow to the divine in you." This respectful way of saying hello, goodbye, and thank you has seen a huge uptake around the world during the coronavirus outbreak as an alternative to handshakes and hugs. The gesture is performed by placing the palms together in prayer pose in front of one's chest, fingers pointing upwards and bowing slightly. Another popular saying is Atithi Devo Bhava, a Sanskrit verse from Hindu scriptures that translates as "the guest is equivalent to God." In Indian culture, guests have always been given supreme importance. You might also encounter the Indian headshake, which can mean yes, thank you, or indicate understanding, depending on the context of the conversation. A joint family in India is where the entire family all live together, which can include parents, wives, children, and occasionally relatives. At the head of the family is the Karta, a senior male or female who makes economic and social decisions on behalf of the entire family. And other relations can be equal of mutual respect, which benefit all members. Arranged marriage is still a tradition in India. It dates back to the Vedic times in the 1500s, where suitable matches from around the kingdom would compete in competitions to win the hand of a royal bride.
As we've seen, Your Excellency, in the beautiful feature, very special traditions and customs, also how to focus on the way when you greet others. This is really symbolic. the bowing for respect.
Yes, yes. So we still follow, Namaste very much, and it's very common in India. So when we meet somebody also we do Namaste, and while leaving also we do Namaste. And of course, it really became very popular even among the politicians and leaders during the COVID pandemic.
Exactly.
So everybody was,
resorting to.
But another very interesting thing, which as you mentioned, is that the Indians continue to celebrate festivals with great enthusiasm. So it is unity in diversity and also modernity amongst tradition.
Yes.
So we are able to coexist at different levels.
That's great, and we've seen lots of attractive traditions and customs, also marriage traditions and customs in India.
Yes,
are very catchy.
Yes, well, marriages are a very big thing. You need to have a very big celebration. It's called in the West they call it the great big Indian wedding. So, when the young couple get married, people call everybody they know. It can be 5,000, 10,000 people, even 50,000 people.
Yeah.
And everybody is decked
huge
out.
Celebrations.
Yes, huge celebrations. And of
special
course,
costumes.
Yes, of course, everybody. But also, like I said, we just celebrated the festival of colors, Holi.
Yeah.
And it's becoming increasingly popular all over the world. We throw dry colors and wet colors at each other, and it's a time for a lot of fun, joy, happiness. It symbolizes the end of winter, but it is increasingly played across the world.
Yeah.
So the Indian
for the advent of spring.
Yes.
So we have Holi is also like an introduction.
Yes, so it means that, because usually it comes in the end of February, early March.
Farewell to the winter and welcome spring.
Welcome to spring.
That's nice, because spring brings colors as well. So when things
and that's why we use colors. So it's very, very colorful.
Very, very colorful festivities, as we've seen diverse and a very rich culture in India, and definitely also we're working on the people-to-people relations, which are always very important dimension that goes side by side with the state diplomacy.
That's right. You see, everybody in India has heard of Egypt and Misr. Egypt is known as Misr. And whether it is the urban areas or even the villages, in the school books it is taught that Egypt is one of the great ancient civilizations, and it has the Sphinx and the pyramids. So all Indians know about Egypt. So naturally, when your president came to India as chief guest for the Republic Day, everybody can relate to that. Even in the remotest part of India, even in the smallest village, people have heard of Misr. So I think Indians would like to visit Egypt. Many of them have not been to Egypt. It's still an unexplored destination. And there is a lot of scope to encourage two-way contact. Now, for example, we have a number of scholarships for Egyptians. We have given about 1,600 scholarships to Egyptian scientists, academicians, officials, and in fact tomorrow we are celebrating an event called ITEC Day. ITEC is the acronym for the scholarships.
Yes.
So tomorrow we will be organizing a celebration, and a number of your scholars who have been to India and taken part in the scholarships
so
will be speaking.
celebrating the success of the scholarship.
Yes,
That's great news, Ambassador. Well, the sky is always the limit, and while talking on more than one level, the political level, the economic level, the level of security and defense, energy, name it. So we are definitely very much in close understanding and fostering this sense of close understanding between both countries. Wrapping up, Ambassador, and talking of future prospects of our cooperation, as I said, the sky is always the limit. We achieved lots of milestones in our relations, and the latest visit was a big hit, big, huge success. So we're building on that.
Yes. You see, President Sisi's visit was historic. As you said, it was a milestone. Both leaders have agreed to upgrade the relationship to a strategic partnership. Now, this has a very special significance because you have a strategic partnership only with very few countries. And as I have said, there is a fresh momentum to our ministerial exchanges. I think all the ministries in India and Egypt have now been tasked to strengthen relations and exchanges, and that is something that I am very busy with, and so is your embassy. So the next few months are going to be very, very hectic for us. Lots of work ahead.
Well, we wish you, Your Excellency, best of success on this mission. A lot has been achieved, and more is definitely coming our way in our strategic partnership. Thank you so much, Excellency. Ambassador Ajit Gupte, Ambassador of India to Egypt. Has been pleasure having Your Excellency tonight as our guest of honor on Nile TV. Always our honor and pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. We talked about our close relations with India, a very solid foundation and a very strong partnership that we're really proud of. I'm Taghreed Hussein. That was Wednesday Debate Live, and many thanks for watching.